Hello, everyone. This is Zam from FilmFestivalCircuit.com and the director of the Oregon Screams Horror Film Festival. Right now, we're gearing up for our fall 2025 screening, which is going to take place on September 18th at the beautiful historic Clinton Street Theater in Portland, Oregon. And in preparation for the festival, we are talking with some of our participating filmmakers. Now, Ed Hartman has a submission in the festival called The Scalpel, directed by Richard Lyford. And it's one of the most unique projects we've seen here in festival history. And I just want to thank you, Ed, for being here today and talking with me.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to do it.
So tell me, what is the deal with Richard Lyford's The Scalpel?
Basically, Richard Lyford was a filmmaker who was born in Seattle in 1917, right around the Russian Revolution, and and he grew up in Seattle, and he made 9 films before he was 20 years old. He wrote 58 stage screenplays. He had a theater in his basement that he built, and it has kind of a. I've been in the building a few times, and because the basement has a back entrance to an alley, he was able to let the audience members come in through there
Wow.
and set up a screening room, and he did amazing stuff. And then he eventually went to Los Angeles and worked for Disney on Fantasia, Dumbo, and Pinocchio, and went to the army and did films for the army and did all sorts of other things throughout his life. But he's the filmmaker nobody knows. He's the unknown
Totally.
Orson Welles, basically.
Well, and it's interesting. If you told me about a kid who's making movies before the age of these 20 and opening a home theater in a year like 1990 or today, it would be remarkable. Well, this is 1930s. He's shooting
Yeah.
on 16, I believe.
Yes.
What are some of the barriers that he's facing at this time? It's really unheard of to be an independent filmmaker.
Well, his family are kind of middle class, and his dad worked in the timber industry. And he had to pretty much work his way to get to pay for his film, and he developed it himself. So I mean,
Wow.
nowadays you have a phone,
Yep.
but imagine, literally having to had to shoot film, and the effects he did had to sometimes be in the camera. I mean, there's
Totally.
ways to do that. Uh, and he learned photography. He was a graphics guy too. He could draw pictures with both hands at the same time. I mean, this guy was borderline genius all the way.
Absolutely.
So, I think just that what he was able to do was motivate up to 100 people in his cast and crew to create costumes, and he did his makeup. The Scalpel has a transition sequence that is pretty much the same level as 1931 Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. That was an Academy Award winning film.
Absolutely.
Carl Struss was the cinematographer, who was probably one of the greatest cinematographers of his age. And he did this remarkable transition in that film. Lyford was able to pretty much do the same thing in his teens using simple equipment. I mean, it's
Totally.
extraordinary, and it looks identical. It really does. So uh, and this was his sixth film, I believe. I only have two and a half of the 9.
Okay.
I'm looking for the other ones. Whether I ever find them, I have no idea. The other films include As the Earth Turns, which is a 45-minute silent science fiction film that I did in 2017 to 19, and that's been on Turner Classic Movies.
Wow. And that
Uh,
is complete, correct?
that is complete.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it is. And Lyford wrote about these films in American Cinematographer.
Right.
So when I got involved in this, I got heavy duty into research on this whole thing, and it's great he did because that told us the length of these films to know if we had them complete. With As the Earth
Right.
Turns, I wound up becoming producer and editor. I was just originally composer, uh, and I found additional footage for that one. I mean, up until through the premiere, we were finding edited footage.
Wow.
So it's a trippy, project in that way, and that's a remarkable film. Uh,
Absolutely.
this was again an earlier one. The other fragment we have was the Ritual of the Dead, which is a mummy film, and I have about 6 or 7 minutes of that.
Really?
And that's a really cool little horror thing too. Um, and these were intense little films. I have a theory about horror films, and I've been to a lot of festivals with these
Okay.
films. I mean, that between these films and a little documentary I created, they've been in over 400 festivals
Wow.
and won over 450 awards and nominations. I mean, that's astounding.
That's
Here,
incredible.
here's this is 80 to 90-year-old stuff,
Yeah.
and it was never released. The reason for that is he was first of all he's in his teens. How are you going to release a 60 millimeter film in Seattle? I
Right.
mean, you can't even do it anyway.
No.
He didn't have any way to
Right.
do it. So
And what's the market for that stuff back then? He's got
yeah,
a home
although
theater.
he got press. I mean, there was an article in one of the
Really?
Seattle newspapers about him bringing Hollywood to Seattle. So he was known. But the most he ever did was show them in his theater or at the high school. Uh, you know,
Interesting.
and there's some really fun. So I was going to tell you about the horror movies.
Yeah.
The thing about it that I've noticed is drama and comedy. That's really hard to do if you're a first time filmmaker or
Right.
you're early on. I mean, it's just really difficult. It can be done. And I've worked with a lot of filmmakers as a composer.
Totally.
But horror, for whatever reason, is a go to genre. And I believe it's because you can make kind of a questionable horror film and it's still fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about Ed Wood.
Yep.
you know,
We love schlock
it's
as horror fans.
entertaining. That's
Yeah,
right. I mean, you
absolutely.
kind of expect horror to, it's so far from reality that, I mean, even sci-fi still has potentially science in there somewhere. So you put it to
Totally.
a harder, thing. But horror, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. Sure, show me a monster. I'm great. I just want to be scared. And
Totally.
and these films, I mean, the Scalpel has some rather intense the moments. As the Earth Turns was much more of a intellectual sci-fi movie.
Right.
It's got some Flash Gordon-y kind of stuff from the 30s for sure, which is still remarkable considering what he was doing. Because all of those Hollywood projects had a budget.
Right.
I know that the Jekyll and Hyde film was like a $500,000
It's
budget in
crazy.
1931. That's like 20 million right now. And here's this guy did it for nothing,
Yeah.
his little film.
I mean,
So
as Turner
anyway,
has miniatures, it's got, I mean, just fully encompassed practical effects. Same with the
yes,
scalpel.
yeah, yeah. A funny story about Lyford when he was in, I don't know, maybe third grade. He got into being Dracula from the time he was 7. He was just
Nice.
into it. And he was before they were doing films, he was doing stage plays in his basement with his friends and family, basically.
Wow.
And mom was making costumes. I mean, it was a family event. And
Totally.
his other brothers and sister they were in these films. They're in the Scalpel as well, along with some friends. Anyway, so they did this version of Dracula, and the school found out about it, and they were kind of intrigued by it. So they invited him to do the production at the school. So, in Adam's Family fashion, he did this, and he figured. I mean, I speculate. I'm working on a screenplay about him. So I speculated that he probably said, "Well, we're going to have to up the ante a little bit. We're playing for the school." I mean, this kid's what? I don't know. That's a 30-year-old, 12.
Right. Right. Yeah.
um, so evidently, it was pretty gruesome. I can imagine like drilling the stake in his
Yeah.
heart.
Right.
And then blood was spewing everywhere, and they got thrown out of school, the whole cast and crew for like 3 days. So
Wow.
yeah, can't make it up. I mean, this is why I want to see a movie about this guy, right? You want to
Absolutely.
see that scene.
Totally. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, well, one thing that struck me is watching this. It's 1936, The Scalpel. There's there's blood, there's gore. It's sort of intense. In 30s you have the dichotomy of the pre and post code,
Yes.
and it seems like obviously in this case it doesn't matter. This kid's probably reading, weird tales in those horror magazines at the time. He's watching movies and he's just making something kind of extreme
Oh yeah, and well, he was into Lon Chaney and
Totally.
Bela Lugosi. So,
Right.
and this is black and white, so blood isn't quite as intense when you see it.
True.
But when I first watched The Scalp, and there's a story about it, I'll tell you in a minute. When I saw some of the scenes, I was a little surprised, I was thrown back because I was like, wow, that's even there's like a needle in the neck,
Yes.
that's kind of
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
whoa,
It's shocking.
man, and it looks like he's really,
Yeah, 1936 did not have many
yeah,
precedents for that kind of stuff.
yeah. So one thing I wanted to say is there's an interesting story behind all this on how it came to me because I did
Yeah.
not see this coming anywhere in my life. I grew up becoming a musician and went to Indiana University and went to school. But I almost went into filmmaking because I was
Okay.
into Super 8 films. So
Okay.
there's some interesting parallels between me and Lyford for sure.
Absolutely.
And I was making crazy little films, but they weren't on that level. And Super 8 actually isn't as good as 16 millimeter, smaller image and stuff like that. But the cameras were easy to use, and you could send away your
Right.
film, and it would get developed, and you could do color. But sound was not available on Super 8 except for some really interesting magnetic tape stuff they were experimenting with,
Right.
but it never really got there. It wasn't optical or
You'd have
anything.
to make a silent.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was making silent films, and one thing I was doing was I started putting records to my little things, and then eventually cassette or reel-to-reel tape because I was getting involved in that in high school. And that's not a whole lot different than what Lyford was doing because one thing Lyford did was as he got to his later films, he experimented with sound, and he had a dual turntable system synchronized to a projector,
Wow. For
which,
exhibition purposes.
yeah,
Okay.
and in his theater setup. And he had a playlist, and it was like classical music, maybe light
Right.
popular music. And he would, needle drop this stuff, synchronize it fairly closely. His eventual goal was to do dialogue as well synchronized,
Right.
which is
Wow.
pretty extreme. Now, sound movies were in existence, although they initially were disc. They
Right.
were doing the same sort of thing. Although I'm not even sure they had the synchronization that well as what Lyford
Right. It
put
was a
together.
fraught project at the time to try and have the
Yeah,
disc system
yeah.
with the
It was
film.
more of a kind of a little effect they were trying to do.
Right.
But Lyford kind of perfected it. I believe that's why Disney picked him up because he was intrigued the fact that here's this kid, 20-year-old kid that had already kind of figured it out.
Right.
And Lyford really never perfected it. And in fact, there's a film that has eluded us about World War One, The Sea Devil, and it was going to be his first sound film. But he never was successful with that. He ran out of time, and it was like 100 people, involved. But he had already promoted the premiere. So what he did was he had music coming on the recordings and stuff like that, but the actors jammed into the projection booth, was kind of in the garage area, and they lip spoke the parts and did
Oh
all
my
the sound
gosh.
effects and the music, and they faked the audience out.
Wow. That's
Again,
utterly utterly unheard of.
you
That's
want to see
incredible.
this on a movie, right?
Yes,
So I'm
absolutely.
looking for people that want to join me on this project. So anyway, so how this thing came to me is really trippy because it's all started with a chat board called the Classic Horror Film Board, which
Okay.
has some really amazing horror people in there. In fact, David Lowery was one of the people that did this, and he's he died a few years ago, but he's a major screenwriter for all sorts of films. If you look him up on IMDb, it's amazing what he did. He
Okay.
got heavy into this. Basically, what happened was this is a DVD called Monsters Crash the Pajama Party on something weird,
Something
and
weird.
it's this
Okay.
kind of crazy Halloween thing where you got to it's got a the general screen. You got to find stuff in there. It's really kind of horribly set up.
Okay.
Anyway, there's two little fragments in there, the Scalpel and Ritual of the Dead. And these were like, 7, 8 minute things.
Wow.
and they didn't no idea where these came from or anything.
Right.
So they put them in there, and they threw some crappy music in against these things. So the classic horror film, they saw these films going, who did this
Yeah, what
stuff?
are
And they
these?
figured out that it was Richard Lyford. And because he wrote about this stuff anyway. And so this thread started in 2013 and went on to this day. It's still going on because I'm adding to it.
Wow.
Anyway, they connected with Richard's great niece, Kim Lyford. And so, and she eventually got involved in this, and she got the films from Richard's son on the East Coast, and there was like 40 or 50 cans of film. A lot of stuff he did was for commercial, education, military, but
Okay,
these
totally.
early films, some of them were in there, and they got
Wow.
digitized from there. So 2017. I'm teaching Kim as a percussion teacher. She's taking some lessons, and she was telling me about these projects. I showed there's a little video I put on of a Buster Keaton scene with some music against it, kind of a Danny Elfman kind of a take.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw this. She said, "Well, that's interesting. I got these films, and would you be interested in scoring them?" I'm like,
Wow,
yeah, I
what?
would. Sounds great. This is what I'm doing. I'm scoring films. I'm writing music for film and TV. Of course, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So I got involved, and I actually, excuse me, discovered about 15, 20 minutes of missing footage in there, playing around with these things. And we had it digitized and restored it. Anyway, and then I scored it, and it went on to, hundreds of festivals and awards. And then again, it was on Turner Classic Movies, which is a real coup. It's on
That's
Amazon,
excellent. Yeah.
Tubi, and Google right
Wow.
now.
So
Uh,
Kim was the one who initially uh, uh, got you aware of this
That's right.
director.
That's right.
Wow.
So she eventually gives me the physical film collection and the film estate, which is really astounding.
Incredible.
So I'm looking at all this stuff, and I followed up with something weird that made this thing initially.
Right.
It took months, but eventually I got a comeback from them, and amazingly they were like a couple miles from my house, and
Right. They're right there.
this is
That's
even
awesome.
weirder. And they had the Ritual of the Dead and the Scalpel, so I was able to scan those, and then I scored those. But these are just
Oh.
partials.
Okay,
And in
yeah.
fact, the Scalpel was the second half of the Scalpel.
Okay.
Okay, so I got those, and they were in beautiful condition. 2021, I did my mini doc, It Gets in Your Blood,
Okay.
and got heavily involved in that. I had to get clearances from Disney and all sorts of places, Aramco in Saudi Arabia. I mean, the phone calls were amazing on this stuff.
Wow.
And there's people, because he did a film called Island of the Arabs or Island of Allah
Right.
that is still played today as a historical footage about the Battle of Riyadh.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I got to know people over there and the whole thing. Anyway, flash to 2024. I'm preparing these stock films. I'm figuring I got to deal with these things. Everything's digitized. What do I do with the film stock? So I looked at some of the film archives. Eventually, I decided on Periscope Films in Los Angeles. They're an archive company
Okay.
and stock footage. And I found a can that I hadn't seen before. And it was the first half of the Scalpel. I saw
That's
the title
amazing.
sequence.
What
How
a
did I
feeling.
miss this? Oh my
Yeah.
God. So I immediately had it digitized. It was a little more washed out. I don't know why. We color corrected it and matched it perfectly. And it matched right up to the second half. I mean, to the second. That was crazy.
It's not
And
perceivable. Yeah.
if you think about this, this is nuts because I got the second half of the film from the East Coast from his son.
Right.
Wait a minute. The first half from his son on the East Coast, and the second half came from the Scalpel in Seattle.
Right.
And they line up together. I mean, and that's over 90 years of time going
That's
by.
wild.
Yeah. So, and again, because I had read his articles about this, I knew the length was right on. It's about
Right.
20 minutes sort of thing. So I completed that score based on the other half that I had, which was a little bit of a trick. Luckily, I keep all those scores and all the sheet music and
Nice.
stuff like that. So, I had themes and stuff like that. Anyway, so that's how this all happened. And this film, I think, is in 162 festivals as of now, and over 200 awards in itself. And again, because it's a horror movie, it's done tremendously on the festival circuit.
Right.
Uh, yeah, and as far as what are where this stuff goes, I don't know. Where it happens. I can tell a couple other things. So Lyford, one of the bigger things he did was in 1950, he edited and directed film about Michelangelo called The Titan, and with Robert Flaherty, a famous documentarian, and the other guy who did Nanook of the North. I mean,
Okay.
heavy people involved in here. Uh, anyway, so he did that, and that won Academy Award. He didn't because he was director on it. And then eventually I created a DVD that has As the Earth Turns, Ritual, Scalpel, all sorts of things like that.
Nice.
The only thing about that is the Scalpel on here was just that initial fragment.
Okay.
So whether I'll be able to go back and fix that, I don't know. But if anybody ever wants to buy this, and feel free, it's really cool to get.
Is
And
your documentary on there as well?
yes, it is.
Okay, cool.
But if they're interested, and I'll always send somebody a link to the full Scalpel on there. An interesting thing that just happened this year is this is a Lon
Oh,
Chaney DVD called The Monster that was just done by Redwood Films in
okay.
France, and they recover stuff and restore. And they asked if the Scalpel could be put on as a bonus on this.
Oh,
And
awesome.
that's so cool
That's
because
so
I know
cool.
Lyford loved Chaney,
Yeah.
and it's a real honor. This film is actually like the first horror comedy, like
Oh, interesting.
Ghostbustery thing.
Oh,
Anyway,
that's so cool.
so yeah, there's many stories about this stuff. The Scalpel, again, it's a nice little 20-minute story. It's kind of medical mayhem in an
Hmm.
institute. I can give you a couple of some zingers about this one.
Yeah,
Um, he there's a lot of medical equipment in this film, and you're wondering where
right.
did he get this? First of all, he shot most of this film in his house. I hate to give that away. It doesn't look like it.
No.
And I've been in this house, and I know the geography of it. And he was brilliant with understanding that what you see in the camera is always what you see. And people think when they're shooting a film somewhere, your brain goes, what about all this other stuff over
Right.
the camera doesn't see any of that. If I take a picture of my keyboard, that's all it sees. It doesn't know where
Exactly.
it is. So he used his house very efficiently on there. And but the medical equipment you got to wonder about. Well, Barbara Berger became Bergère when she became a well-known soap opera queen in the 50s, 60s, and
Okay.
70s. Ironically, on As the World Turns,
Right.
beat that. So, and she was a good friend of Richard, lived nearby, and her brother, Steenberger, looks like Einstein, but Steenberger, was going to the University of Washington as a medical student. He became a doctor.
Okay.
I also, some research discovered that old Richard was he went, because he did go for a few semesters at UW before he bolted for LA. And he became part of the, pre-med
Okay.
club. And guess who was teaching that? Einstein was directing that club.
There you
And you
go.
just know, as a
Yeah.
tremendous guerrilla filmmaker, he was like, hey, I know your sister. I
Right.
got her in a movie. How'd you like to be in this movie? We just need a few things. And he's trashing this stuff. I mean, there's stuff's
Oh
coming
yeah.
down. Anyway, and I believe they actually did get access to a medical room at a place in downtown Seattle for a scene or two
Okay. Wow.
on there. So he was great at using. There's lots of Northwest, and As the Earth Turns, there's many stories of him using gasworks in Seattle and all sorts of
Is
interesting
it Boeing?
locations. Boeing, yeah.
Right.
We've tracked all this stuff down, and a lot of guerrilla filmmaking. And at the gasworks plant, it was still kind of going there, but I think it may have stopped but when they filmed in there, there's a scene of them running away, and they were literally running away from the guards.
So he had the sense to capture that in real time as it's happening.
Oh
Never waste a
yeah,
good shot.
that's right. That's right. Well,
Incredible.
that's all he could do.
Well,
He needed the
it's a
shot.
remarkable story, and you've been involved in, it seems like really the whole process from a fragment, from something weird and the niece. Tell me though, what's the process of scoring these films? Because you've scored As the Earth Turns and The Scalpel. What is
Yeah.
that sort of process like? What is your intention with that?
Well, it's a little scary when you're working with a deceased director,
Right.
because if you think about it, when I work with a living director, most of them are, you work with them. You may have to score a film or a scene 17 times until you get it
Okay.
right. You keep delivering stuff and like, nah, I don't like that. And usually it's the first thing you give them they like, and then you go through 12 other versions and you come back to the first thing, right? So you have to be very patient of this stuff.
Right.
With this, it was tricky because I didn't know what he liked because he's not around.
Right.
Uh, but the interesting thing is I was halfway through to scoring As the Earth Turns when I found out he was playing around with sound, and that was really scary to me because I thought, oh my God, he's got a playlist.
Right.
Which would have been called temp pieces to me as a
Okay.
composer, where filmmaker says, well, I want you to sound something like this, and they'll give
Okay,
you John
totally.
Williams. That idea. So I freaked out with that. When I discovered that he liked Dvorak and Stravinsky, I relaxed because that was kind of the music I was putting together.
Okay.
I had pretty much open season to anything I wanted because Kim was really gracious to me to saying, hey, look, just have fun with this thing. And I did. So I didn't have to worry about that. We weren't working on John Williams' budget here. I didn't have $1 million to write a score, have a symphony orchestra play it.
Right.
So with all the tricks in the book, I created the score for a very, very micro budget for these things.
Nice.
But
In the
it sounds
spirit of
pretty good.
Lyford.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I'm a percussionist, so there's a lot of live instruments along with electronic stuff. But all these scores were period, and I've never been a big fan of silent films with kind of electronic modern scores. There's nothing really
Right.
wrong with them. I mean, they can be very cool. But for me, I'm a period guy anyway. When I write
Yeah.
music for film and TV, it's inevitably we need something like a marching band, or I'm that guy. That
Okay,
creates
totally.
weird stuff. Like I had a piece in the Twilight Zone TV show that was like a '50s Muzak piece.
Okay,
You
totally.
know, you wouldn't guess that for the Twilight Zone, but it was a really funny use on there. It was like a
Right.
really great episode that had the what do you call it? To serve man guys, that all that
Okay.
stuff, famous stuff. So I've been I had a stuff in well, what's the I can't remember anyway. Ed Hartman music that has all my stuff in there.
I'll
But
check it out.
so as far as scoring is concerned, I'm an improviser at heart, so
Okay.
I tend to work my way through a scene if I have kind of open thing, and then take it apart, orchestrate it, bring the strings, the brass percussion, whatever, on there. And I can actually play you a second of the theme for
I
this
would
stuff.
love to hear it. Yes.
So this is kind of the main theme, and it's very Bach, Baroque.
Okay.
There's just something about that for this kind of horror, So anyway, this is kind of the main theme. Something like
That's
that. Wasn't
awesome.
perfect. Yeah, and there's some organ in there for
Right.
effects. And As Your Turns, I used organ a little more because I really like Bernard Herrmann's use of organ
Okay, for sure.
in his sci-fi movies and stuff like that. But the organ adds just kind of an intensity, and
Yeah. It's
it's very
dirge-like. It's got the
and
fugues
certain
behind it. Yeah.
yeah, and certainly with this kind of horror film, anything like that is really cool for that. So from there you would then again decide where you want your brass percussion and all that kind of stuff to go, to highlight it out. Because I was dealing with the second half earlier, I
Right.
had to match that in this case. So it was kind of an unusual project in that case to match the themes.
Right. So you
And,
had the
and
second part already scored, and then you had to do something to, okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
and the
Tie it
second
together.
half, because I didn't have the whole film, was more difficult because I didn't know. It kind of starts in the middle of it, and then
Right.
I had to kind of build it to the end.
How you got there. Yeah.
Now you create the beginning, and you have to kind of sandwich that to that middle point. But it does kind of a nice arc now. It kind of goes up and down, and I like how it came out. I mean,
Absolutely.
quality was, and I was able to get the same editing and mixing, mastering in the studio. And that's one of the big secrets if you ever work with a composer and you don't have a massive budget. You do want to have somebody ideally that can mix your music, not just your dialogue. Dialogue mixers and sound effects, that's kind of there, but you want to take that score and ideally make it perfect before you even get it to them.
Okay,
And
totally.
that elevates the score to another level. That's one reason these films have done so well because they sound very well produced. And a
Absolutely.
silent film, the one thing about a silent film is that because you don't have a dialogue, it's kind of easier to score in a way because you don't have to dodge the dialogue.
Right.
But you have to score it end to end because if you stop music, there's nothing there. One
Right.
thing
I see.
interesting about that is if you had music stopping with 16 or 35 millimeter, the projector would still be ticky tocking in the
Right.
theater. With digital, it's dead silent. And I guarantee it, if you have more than 3 seconds of no music and you have silence, the audience is going to figure something's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you have to be very careful about that, and so therefore you have to keep something going, even if it's an
Interesting.
ambient something like that, and that makes it really challenging, but really fun to do it.
Totally. Well,
And
it's
that
20
means
minutes of continuous
it really
soundtrack.
is. And for a composer, that's kind of it's like a ballet,
Right.
and it's really rewarding to do that. You have to carry not you have to carry the emotion, the plot, even the sound effects. I could have put more standard sound effects in there, but I've never really liked that either. Of course, in true silent films, there were when they were being played live, they were doing sound effects in the theater.
Right.
So that's not unusual. But I always wanted this stuff to have kind of more an artsy kind of a feel about it.
Totally.
So any kind of the sound effects came from the orchestra. And I felt good about that. If you have somebody get socked and you use percussion element or something
Right.
like that. But I didn't want to just try and do something, standard on there.
Totally. Well, it's brilliantly done. It elevates these movies. They feel, very professional at this point with the score and with the effort that Richard's putting into it. I think it's even now a great testament to independent filmmaking. It's going to be screening amongst other people who are essentially the Richard Lifers of today, trying to get their friends together and making these things happen. But you sort of were saying you don't know what's next, but is there any current efforts you're making to either release these in a new DVD or maybe find more fragments, or what's the process for
Well,
you
I'm
right
always
now?
looking for fragments. I don't know whether I'm ever going to find them. Occasionally, I put the word out, but man, it's a needle in a massive haystack to pull this
Okay,
off. The fact that any of this stuff exists is incredible. He sold some of this stuff later to make money, and what do you do? Uh,
right.
but I'm curious about them for sure. As far as making a new DVD again, that might happen the next year if it makes sense to do that.
Totally.
The screenplay has the most interest to me, and I have to, figure out a
Well,
way
tell
for
me a bit
somebody
about
to
that.
do
Is
that.
this like a Ed Wood style biopic that you're hoping to make? What's the
Well,
what's the
I mean,
feel?
and people compare Richard to Ed Wood. Not he's really not comparable. I mean,
No.
Ed Wood was a master of shtick. Richard was a serious filmmaker for sure, and he was successful as one later.
Right.
I mean, I know that Disney said his quote to his son Chris was that Richard could tell a story in 30 minutes better than anybody he knew. I mean, that's coming from Walt Disney,
Crazy. Crazy.
and he worked on stuff on Wonderful World of Disney, and but again, because he was like most of us, life happens. You get
Yep.
married, you do all this other sort of stuff, and you just run out of time or whatever. So he didn't quite do, and mostly because he got drafted.
Right.
That when he came back, it was kind of after the game for him. So, and he
Right.
had a different opinion about what to do. He got married, had kids. So, but it would have been a different story, I think, if a lot of those things had happened. And I'm sure he's looking at his life going, well, it would happen the way it. And for me, again, I could have gone to Cal Arts and gotten into
Right.
filmmaking in 1970s, which would have put me probably buddies with Spielberg, God
Absolutely.
knows.
Yep.
So, but we all determine our futures out there. And so here I am later in life in my third act and I'm making movies. I mean, that's a trip in itself. So,
Totally.
what happens to that, I don't know. But it's a screenplay right now. And, if there's, people out there that want to produce it, we'll see. I've had some help from WGA screenwriter. And
Excellent.
so
So it's a complete screenplay as it stands
yeah,
right
pretty
now?
much.
Okay.
Again, it needs help, but the story is there, absolutely. More
Sweet.
than enough. There may be enough for a Netflix series at this point. I don't
Okay. Yeah,
know.
episodic. That'd be
I,
awesome.
I mean, I kind of prefer the old movie thing, but
Yeah.
who knows? No, I'd love to see it on a big screen. I think that would
Yeah.
be exciting for that. And it's probably I still haven't seen the Fabermans or the Fablemans.
Right.
Spielberg's thing that came out a few years
Could
ago.
be
I
interesting. Yeah.
refused to see it because I didn't want it to influence it. And
Totally.
in fact, the thing that brings everything together is when we did a 7-day theatrical premiere for As the Earth Turns, so that we could submit it to the Oscars in 2019. Of course you do. It's a
Yeah.
festival. It's another
Absolutely.
festival. Didn't cost
Yeah.
any money. Although to make the DVDs and send 1,000 out to the producers and
Right.
directors of the Academy, that cost a little bit of money.
Absolutely.
And I was assured that Scorsese and Spielberg both got a DVD that year.
Very
So,
cool.
and the irony is when we did the theatrical, I worked hard with PR, and I got a quote from the LA Times reviewer who said, if Spielberg had been making 60 millimeter movies in the 1930s, this is what he would have done. So, when you start framing all this stuff, you really
Yeah.
start looking at Lyford as, this is somebody that really you want to understand. And I'm amazed, like you expressed this interesting interest about him that kind of blew my mind, that there's still people seeing this stuff and going,
Right.
wow, who is this guy? Why don't
Yeah.
I know about him? And that's exactly the point of all this. I think he can influence and inspire filmmakers because it's not the gear, it's never the gear.
Nope.
So that's what you really want to do. You want to understand it's all about your drive. I think we're about to run out.
Yeah, well, Ed, that's I think it's a perfect summation of what this guy stands for and what this is about. And you're doing an excellent job putting it out there, scoring it, bringing it up to that professional level. And yeah, it's just a testament that people have been doing the independent horror thing forever, and it'll never stop. And there's no amount of constraints that'll limit what one can do. So thank you, man.
Thank
I
you
really
very
appreciate you
much.
talking to me,
Thank you.
and I
Have a
cannot
great
wait.
festival.
Thank you. I cannot wait to screen this on September 18th
You bet.
at the Oregon Screams Horror Film Festival. Well, take care, man. Thank you so much.
You bet.